40 people watched Chidi beat his wife unconscious in a supermarket parking lot. And that was the scariest part. Not the slap, not the blood, not even the way he stood over her like he didn't know what he'd done. It wasn't the fact that this wasn't his first time, not even close. And when they finally grabbed him, he collapsed crying like a little boy. But to understand why a man would beat his wife unconscious in broad daylight, you have to go back 24 years. You have to go back to a kitchen in Lagos where an 8-year-old boy named Chidi stood in a doorway he wasn't supposed to be standing in, watching something no child should ever see. His father's fist connected with his mother's jaw. The sound was the same, that sharp, wet crack of knuckle meeting bone. His mother's head snapped to the side. She didn't scream. She'd learned years ago that screaming only made it worse. Chidi's hands gripped the doorframe, his small body went rigid. His brain tried to process what his eyes were showing him, but the only thought that surfaced was, if I move, he'll see me. If he sees me, I'm next. So he stood there, silent, watching. His father hit her again. Then he stopped, walked to the dining table and sat down. Just sat there, breathing hard, hands still clenched. And then, this is the part that programmed Chidi's nervous system for the next 2 decades, his mother stood up. She wiped the blood from her lip with the back of her hand. She walked to the stove, and she started humming. A church song, soft and steady, like nothing had happened. 20 minutes later, she served his father jollof rice and chicken. His father ate. The house was calm again, no shouting, no chaos. Just the sound of forks on plates and his mother humming in the kitchen. Chidi's 8-year-old brain recorded this sequence like a computer program. Violence, chaos, silence, mother cooks, father eats, order restored. He didn't learn that hitting was wrong. He learned that hitting worked. He learned that when a man feels powerless, his fists can make the world make sense again. He learned that women who love you will hum after you hurt them. And he learned that the sound of a slap, followed by silence, meant everything was going to be okay. 300 kilometers away, in a cramped 2-bedroom flat in Ibadan, a 10-year-old girl named Adaizi knelt beside her father's body on the bathroom floor. He was unconscious. Again. The smell of cheap gin and vomit filled the small space. She tried to lift him. Her small hands gripped his arm, pulled, but he was too heavy. She started crying, not loud because her mother was asleep and her younger brother Emeka needed to sleep too. But quiet, desperate tears. "Papa, please, please get up. I'll help you. Just get up." He didn't move. She dragged a pillow from the bedroom, shoved it under his head, and covered him with a wrapper. Then she sat beside him for 2 hours, watching his chest rise and fall, terrified that this time he wouldn't wake up. He did wake up. 3 days later, he was sober. He hugged her, called her his strong girl, and promised, like he always promised, that he was done drinking. Adaiz believed him. She had to. Because if she didn't believe him, that meant she had failed. That meant her love wasn't strong enough. That meant she wasn't good enough to save him. A week later, she found him passed out again. She tried harder, hid the bottles, poured out the gin when he wasn't looking, begged him, bargained with him, prayed over him. None of it worked. And when she was 12, her father died. Liver failure. At the funeral, her uncle pulled her aside and said, "You did your best, Adaize. You were a good daughter." But all she heard was, "If you had been better, he'd still be alive." Her 10-year-old brain recorded this sequence. "I tried to fix him. I failed. He died. I wasn't good enough." She didn't learn to avoid broken men. She learned that she hadn't been good enough to fix them yet. And she carried that wound into every relationship that followed. 20 years later, Adaiz sat across from Chidi at a small restaurant in Victoria Island. She was 28, a social worker at a non-profit that helped trauma survivors rebuild their lives. She wore her hair natural, her smile warm, her eyes tired in the way that people who care too much always look tired. Chidi was 32, a corporate executive at an oil and gas firm, sharp suit, confident posture, the kind of man who walked into rooms and made them quieter. They were on their 3rd date. The first 2 had been easy. Laughter, good conversation, the kind of chemistry that makes you check your phone hoping they've texted. But tonight, something shifted. The waiter brought the wrong order. Chidi's jaw tightened. I specifically said no onions. The waiter apologized, started to take the plate back. Chidi's voice dropped, cold, cutting. Do you people not listen? Or do you just not care? The waiter flinched. Adais watched. Other women at other tables would have seen this moment and made a mental note. Red flag. This man has a temper. Walk away. But Adais didn't see a red flag. She saw a crack in his armor. She saw pain beneath the control. She saw a man who had been hurt and learned to hurt back. And instead of walking away, she leaned closer. Hey, she said softly, touching his hand. It's okay. It's just onions. Chidi looked at her, really looked at her. Most women flinched when he raised his voice. Most women looked at him like he was dangerous. But Adais looked at him like he was wounded. And for the first time since he was 8 years old, standing in that doorway watching his father, Chidi felt something he didn't have a name for yet. He felt safe. Not because she made him feel powerful, but because she didn't flinch, because she saw the anger and stayed anyway. Adais saw the shift in his face, the softening, the relief, and something in her chest clicked into place. Here, she thought, is a man who needs fixing. Here is my second chance. She didn't know it yet, but she had just chosen him for all the wrong reasons. And he had just chosen her for the exact same ones. The narrator would tell you, if you were listening closely, that two wounded children had just recognized each other across a table. And they both thought they'd found safety. They had found a mirror. 6 months later, they were living together. A modest 2-bedroom flat in Lekki. Adais had moved in after Chidi insisted. Why pay rent when you're here every night anyway? It made sense. It felt like progress. But what Adais didn't notice, what she chose not to notice, was that the red flags didn't disappear. They just became part of the routine. The first time he hurt her, it wasn't a slap, it was a grip. They were arguing about her work schedule. She had taken an extra shift at the non-profit, which meant she'd be home late. Chidi didn't like it. You're always putting those people before me. Chidi, they're trauma survivors. I need you here. His tone was flat, final. She tried to explain. He grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to stop her mid-sentence. His fingers dug into her skin, her breath caught. Chidi, you're hurting me. He let go immediately, his face crumpled. I'm sorry, I'm not my father. I swear I'm not. He said it like a prayer, like if he said it enough times, it would be true. Adais rubbed her wrist. She should have left. She should have called a friend, packed a bag, walked out. But instead she heard herself say, I know you're not. You're trying. That's what matters. She wrapped her arms around him. He cried into her shoulder, and in that moment, Adais made a decision she didn't consciously register. If I love him hard enough, he'll heal. If I'm patient enough, he'll stop. If I just don't give up on him, I'll prove I'm not the little girl who couldn't save her father. The narrator would tell you this was the moment she became complicit, not in the abuse, but in staying. The incidents didn't stop, they escalated, slowly, so slowly she could tell herself each one was an isolated event. 3 weeks later, he punched the bedroom wall during an argument. His knuckles bled, he apologized. She bandaged his hand. A month after that, he shattered a glass in the kitchen, shards everywhere. She cleaned it up while he sat on the couch, head in his hands, muttering, I'm not him. I'm not him. 2 months after that, he screamed in her face, so close she could feel his breath, so loud her ears rang. Then he crumpled, sobbing, begging her not to leave. She stayed, every time she stayed, because leaving would mean admitting she had failed again. And Adais could survive a lot of things, but she could not survive being the woman who gave up on another broken man. Her best friend Ngozi noticed. Ngozi was sharp, no nonsense, the kind of friend who loved you enough to tell you the truth even when it hurt. They met for lunch at a buka near Adaisi's office. Ngozi saw the bruise on Adaisi's arm, faint, yellowing but unmistakable. Adaisi. Adaisi pulled her sleeve down. It's nothing. Is he hurting you? No, Ngozi, it's not like that. He's dealing with trauma. His father used to… I don't care what his father did. Ngozi's voice was quiet but iron hard. Is he hurting. You. Daisy looked away. You don't understand him. I understand that you're making excuses for a man who put his hands on you. He needs me. Ngozi leaned forward. Daisy, listen to me. You can't love someone into being safe. You'll just teach them that love can survive anything, even violence. Adaize's eyes filled with tears. I can't give up on him, Ngozi. I can't. Why not? Because if I do, it means I wasn't enough. Again, Ngozi reached across the table, gripped Adaize's hand. Baby, you are not responsible for fixing every broken man who crosses your path. And staying with someone who hurts you doesn't make you strong. It makes you a target. Adaize pulled her hand back. You don't know what you're talking about. She left the restaurant. She didn't speak to Ngozi for 3 weeks after that, because the truth Ngozi had spoken was too close to the truth Adaize had been running from since she was 10 years old. I choose broken men because fixing them would prove I wasn't the helpless little girl who couldn't save her father. And if I can't fix them, it means I'm still that girl. And I can't be that girl anymore. I can't. Chidi's escalation wasn't random. It had a pattern, and the pattern always started the same way, with him feeling small. At a family gathering, his mother made a joke. Chidi, you're lucky Adaize puts up with you. She's too good for you. It was said lightly. Everyone laughed, but Chidi didn't laugh. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched under the table. Adaize saw it. She always saw it. She touched his hand, whispered, "It's okay, she's just joking." But it wasn't okay, because in that moment, Chidi wasn't a 32-year-old corporate executive. He was an 8-year-old boy standing in a doorway, listening to his mother's voice after his father's fists, and learning that men who feel small make other people smaller. Adaize didn't know this yet, but she was about to learn it in the worst way possible. The thing about violence is that it doesn't announce itself. It builds. Brick by brick, incident by incident, until the house you're living in is made entirely of things you told yourself weren't that bad. Adaize had been living in that house for 8 months. Chidi worked long hours. Corporate executive at an oil firm meant 60-hour weeks, international calls, high-pressure deals. He came home exhausted. Adaize understood. She made his favorite meals, kept the house quiet, gave him space. But space wasn't what Chidi needed. What Chidi needed was control, because control was the only thing that made him feel like he wasn't the powerless boy watching his father. And when he felt that control slipping, his body defaulted to the program. One evening, Adaize stayed late at work. A client, 16-year-old girl, survivor of trafficking, had a breakdown during their session. Adaize couldn't leave her. She texted Chidi, "Running late, client emergency, I'll be home by 9. Chidi read the text. He didn't respond. By the time Adaize got home at 9:15, he was sitting in the living room. Lights off, just sitting there in the dark. Chidi? You said 9. I know, I'm sorry, the session ran. You said 9. It's 9:15. His voice was flat. Adaize felt her stomach tighten. Babe, it was 15 minutes. I couldn't just leave her. You can always leave them. But you can't leave me for 15 minutes. That's not fair. He stood, walked toward her. Fair? You want to talk about fair? I work 12 hours a day so you can play therapist to people who don't even appreciate it, and you can't come home on time. Chidi, she was crying. She's 16. I needed you here. The shout filled the room. Adaize flinched. Chidi saw the flinch, and something in him shifted. He grabbed the remote off the coffee table, threw it. It hit the wall, shattered. Batteries rolled across the floor. Adaize stood frozen. Chidi's breathing was ragged. Then he collapsed onto the couch, head in his hands. I'm sorry. God, I'm sorry. Adaize's hands were shaking, but she walked over, sat beside him. It's okay, she heard herself say. You're just stressed. And she believed it, because believing it was easier than admitting she was living with a man whose anger was no longer occasional. It was becoming the weather. The narrator would tell you that this moment where Adaize sat down beside him instead of walking out, was the moment her savior complex became predatory. Not predatory toward him, predatory toward herself, because she was using his brokenness to avoid facing her own. Every time she stayed, every time she soothed him, every time she told herself he's getting better, he just needs time, she was feeding the wound inside her that said, if I can save him, I'll finally prove I wasn't powerless. I'll finally prove I'm enough. But you can't save someone by setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. And Adese was already burning. 2 weeks later, he broke a glass. Another argument, this time about money. She'd sent some to her younger brother Emeka for school fees. Chidi saw the transaction on their joint account. You didn't ask me. Chidi, it's my money. It's our money. We share this account. I earned it. I can… He slammed the glass down on the counter. It shattered. Shards everywhere. One piece cut his palm. Blood dripped onto the tile. Adese grabbed a towel, tried to wrap his hand. He pulled away. Don't touch me. Chidi, you're bleeding. I said don't touch me. She stepped back. He stood there, blood dripping, chest heaving. Then he looked at her. And for a split second, Adese saw something in his eyes that terrified her more than the shouting. She saw confusion, like he didn't know where he was, like he didn't know who he was. Then it passed. He walked to the bathroom. She cleaned up the glass. Neither of them spoke about it. The incidents kept coming. A shove during an argument. A door slammed so hard the frame cracked. A hand around her arm, tight enough to leave marks. Each time he apologized. Each time he cried. Each time he said the same words, I'm not my father. And each time Adese stayed. Because leaving would mean looking in the mirror and saying, I chose this. I saw the wall he punched. I saw the glass he shattered. I saw the grip on my wrist. And I told myself it wasn't that bad. I told myself I could fix him. I told myself I was strong enough. But I'm not fixing him. I'm enabling the wound. And I'm using his wound to avoid healing my own. That truth was too heavy to carry. So she stayed. Adese's younger brother, Emeka, noticed. He was 23, in his final year at university, sharp and protective. He came to visit one Saturday. Chidi was at work. Emeka sat in the kitchen while Adese made eba and egusi. He watched her move. The way she kept glancing at the clock, the way her shoulders were tight, the way she jumped slightly when a door slammed somewhere in the building. Ada. Are you okay? She didn't look at him. I'm fine. You don't look fine. Emeka, I'm just tired. He stood, walked over, gently turned her to face him. Did he hit you? Her eyes filled with tears. No. Ada, he didn't hit me, Emeka. Sometimes he gets angry, but he's working on it. Emeka's face hardened. He's working on it. Ada, listen to yourself. You sound like Mama used to sound when she made excuses for Papa. Adese pulled away. Don't compare them. Why not? Papa never hit Mama either. But he hurt her every day by choosing alcohol over his family, and you stayed by his side, trying to fix him until the day he died. And now you're doing it again. It's not the same. It's exactly the same. You're choosing a man who's hurting you because you think if you love him hard enough, you'll finally prove you were strong enough to save Papa. But Ada, his voice cracked. You couldn't save Papa. I couldn't save Papa, and you can't save Chidi. The only person you can save is yourself. Adese turned back to the stove. I'm not leaving him. Emeka stood there for a long moment. Then he said quietly, Okay, but when this ends, and Ada, it will end, I'm going to be here, and I won't say I told you so. I'll just help you rebuild. He left. Adese stood at the stove, stirring soup she had no appetite for, and let the tears fall into the pot. Saturday morning, Adese and Chidi went to the supermarket, a routine errand, groceries for the week. Nothing special. The air between them was tense but manageable, the kind of tension that had become normal, the kind you learn to breathe around. They loaded the cart, bread, rice, tomatoes, chicken. Chidi was quieter than usual. Work had been brutal that week. A deal had fallen through. His boss had called him into the office, questioned his competence in front of junior colleagues. Chidi had smiled, nodded, taken it. But inside, the 8-year-old boy was screaming, You're useless. You'll never be enough. You're small and weak and powerless. He didn't tell Adese any of this. He just walked through the aisles, jaw tight, hands gripping the cart like it might run away. They finished shopping, walked to the parking lot, started loading groceries into the trunk. Another couple, mid-30s, friendly, familiar faces from the estate, pulled up beside them. The man waved. Chidi, Adaeze, how far? Chidi nodded. We day. The woman smiled at Adaeze. Adaeze, you look well-o. Marriage is suiting you. Adaeze smiled back. Thank you. The man laughed, gestured at the groceries. Chidi, I hope you remember the list this time. My wife says I can't go shopping alone anymore because I always forget something. The woman laughed, nudged her husband. It's true. Last week he forgot the eggs. The eggs. The one thing I wrote in capital letters. Adaeze laughed. And without thinking, she said, Chidi is the same. I had to send him a voice note this morning just to remind him we needed bread. The couple laughed. Chidi's hand tightened on a grocery bag. The plastic crinkled. Adaeze didn't notice. But the narrator would tell you, in that moment, something inside Chidi fractured. Because he didn't hear a harmless joke between couples. He heard humiliation. He heard his father's voice. You're useless. You can't even remember a simple task. You're nothing. He heard his mother's laughter after his father hit her. He heard the sound of being small in front of people who mattered. And his nervous system, trained by 1,000 nights of watching, waiting, absorbing, didn't ask questions. It executed the program. The couple drove off, still laughing. Adaeze turned to put the last bag in the trunk. Babe, can you grab the... The slap came before the sentence finished. Open palm, left side of her face. The sound cracked through the parking lot like a gunshot. Adaze's head snapped to the side, her vision blurred. Her ears rang. She tried to process what had just happened. But her brain couldn't catch up. Did he just... She turned to look at him. And in his eyes, she saw something she'd never seen before. Not anger. Terror. The terror of an 8-year-old boy who felt powerless and only knew one way to make it stop. Chidi. He grabbed her by the hair, pulled her toward him. She gasped, tried to pull away. He shoved her. She stumbled backward, caught herself on the car. 40 people in the parking lot. 40 witnesses. Not one moved. Adaeze tried to stand upright. Her hands were shaking. Chidi, please. His fist connected with her temple. The world tilted. Her knees buckled. She hit the asphalt. Her purse fell. Lipstick rolled into the gutter. Her phone screen cracked. She tried to push herself up. He kicked. Not hard, but hard enough. She collapsed. Blood pooled under her cheek, and in the half-second before she lost consciousness, a thought surfaced with absolute devastating clarity. I chose this. I saw the red flags and called them challenges. I saw the broken glass and called it stress. I saw his father's fists in his hands and told myself I could love them away. I didn't save him. I enabled the wound. And now the wound is killing me. Chidi stood over her, breathing hard. His hands were shaking. And for 3 seconds, 3 terrible electric seconds, his body felt relief. The chaos was over. The humiliation was gone. The parking lot was silent. Just like his father taught him. Then the program broke. A man, construction worker, 50-something, scar across his jaw, broke through the crowd, tackled Chidi to the ground, pinned him. You don't fucking move. Chidi didn't fight back. He didn't resist. He collapsed into the asphalt, and he started sobbing. Not adult tears, high-pitched, gasping, choking sobs. The sobs of a child who just watched himself become his father. Someone called the police. Someone else called an ambulance. A woman knelt beside Adaeze, checked her pulse, whispered, "Stay with me, sister. Stay with me." Adaze's eyes fluttered. She could hear sirens. She could taste blood. And through the haze of pain and shock, she heard the narrator's voice. Not out loud, but inside, where the truth lives. You didn't deserve this, but you chose him. You saw the wall he punched. You saw the grip on your wrist. You saw the terror in his eyes and thought love could cure it. But love doesn't cure trauma. Boundaries do. Accountability does. And you gave him neither. You gave him permission by staying, and this blood on the asphalt is the receipt. The paramedics loaded her onto a stretcher. Broken nose, fractured orbital bone, concussion, possible internal bleeding. Chidi was in handcuffs, still sobbing. The construction worker stood over him, arms crossed, jaw set. She your wife? Chidi nodded, tears streaming. You love her? Chidi nodded again. The man crouched down, looked Chidi in the eye. Then you just killed the only person who believed in you. He stood, walked away, left Chidi there on his knees, handcuffed, surrounded by witnesses, grocery bags scattered across the asphalt, the program finally, catastrophically broken. The narrator would tell you this. He didn't hit her because he hated her. He hit her because 24 years ago, an 8-year-old boy stood in a doorway and watched his father's fists teach him that violence restores order. And he hit her because she chose him, knowing he was broken, thinking her love could be the glue. But you can't glue a fracture from the outside. Healing happens from within. Or it doesn't happen at all. And now two people, both carrying wounds they didn't create, both making choices that turned trauma into tragedy, lay in the ruins of the life they thought they were building. He in handcuffs, she on a stretcher, both bleeding, both broken. Both finally terribly facing the truth they'd been running from since childhood. The wound doesn't heal because you ignore it. It just waits. And when it surfaces, it destroys everything in its path. 72 hours after the parking lot, Chidi stood in a courtroom. Orange jumpsuit, handcuffs. No tie, no suit, no confident posture. Just a man who looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. The magistrate read the charges. Assault causing grievous bodily harm, public disturbance, domestic violence. Chidi's lawyer, a junior associate from his company's legal team, clearly uncomfortable, stood beside him. The prosecutor presented evidence, 40 witnesses, 12 cell phone videos, medical reports, fractured orbital bone, broken nose, grade 2 concussion, bruised ribs. The magistrate looked at Chidi over her reading glasses. Mr. Okafor, how do you plead? Chidi's voice was barely a whisper. Guilty. His lawyer's head snapped toward him. Mr. Okafor, we discussed. Guilty, Chidi said again, louder this time. I did it. I hurt her. I'm guilty. The courtroom went quiet. The magistrate studied him for a long moment. Then she delivered the sentence. 18 months. Mandatory psychological evaluation and therapy. Lifetime restraining order. Your name will be entered into the domestic violence registry. You are prohibited from contacting the victim directly or indirectly for the remainder of your natural life. The gavel came down. Chidi didn't react. He just stood there, staring at his hands. The hands that had held her, the hands that had hurt her, the hands that looked exactly like his father's. The narrator would tell you this. The state didn't care about his childhood. The law doesn't audit trauma, it audits behavior. And his behavior put a woman in the ICU. The forensic losses came fast. His job terminated within 48 hours. Moral turpitude clause in his contract. No severance. His reputation, the videos went viral. Local blogs picked it up. His face was everywhere, captioned with words like monster and abuser. His assets, joint bank account, frozen pending divorce proceedings. His identity, the man who swore he'd never be his father, died in a supermarket parking lot on a Saturday morning. What remained was just the boy, the terrified, broken boy who never learned another way. Adaze woke up in the hospital on day 2. Her face was unrecognizable, swollen, bruised, bandaged. Her left eye was swollen shut. Her nose was in a splint. Every breath hurt. A nurse, older woman, kind eyes, name tag that read, Sister Patience, sat beside her bed. Welcome back, my dear. Adaze tried to speak. Her throat was dry. Sister Patience held a cup of water to her lips. Adaze drank. Then she asked the question she already knew the answer to. Where is he? In custody. You're safe. Adaze closed her eyes. Safe. The word felt foreign. She hadn't felt safe in months. Maybe longer. Maybe she'd never felt safe. Sister Patience pulled her chair closer. Your brother is outside. Your friend Ngozi is outside. Half the church is outside. You are not alone. Adaze's chest tightened. I was so stupid. No, Sister Patience said firmly. You were not stupid. You were wounded. And wounded people make choices from their wounds, not from their wisdom. Adaze's good eye filled with tears. I saw the signs. I saw them and I stayed. Yes, you did. And now you have a choice. What choice? Sister Patience leaned forward. Which version of yourself are you going to be? The woman who stayed because she thought love could fix him, or the woman who leaves because she finally understands that love without boundaries is just slow suicide? The question landed like a scalpel, clean, precise, cutting straight to the truth Adaisi had been avoiding since she was 10 years old. Which one are you going to be? Emeka came in first. He sat beside her bed and held her hand and didn't say a word. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't ask, "Why didn't you leave?" He just sat there, and after a long silence, he said, "I'm here, Ada. Whatever you need. I'm here." Adai squeezed his hand. Then Ngozi came in. Ngozi, who had warned her. Ngozi, who had begged her to leave. Ngozi sat on the other side of the bed, and she cried, not loudly, just quiet, steady tears. "I'm sorry," Adais whispered. "For what?" "For not listening." Ngozi shook her head. "You don't apologize to me. You survived. That's all that matters." "I almost didn't." "But you did. And now you get to choose what comes next." Adais looked at her, this woman who had loved her enough to tell her the truth even when it cost their friendship. "I'm leaving him." Ngozi nodded. "I know." "No, I mean I'm leaving him. For real. Not because I'm scared, not because people are telling me to, but because I finally understand." "Understand what?" Adaisi's voice cracked. "That I wasn't trying to save him. I was trying to save myself from the guilt of not saving my father. And I almost died trying to fix a wound that wasn't mine to fix." Ngozi reached across the bed, gripped her hand. "You are not responsible for healing the person who hurt you." Adaisi nodded, and for the first time in 8 months, she believed it. 4 days after the incident, a lawyer came to see Adaisi in the hospital. A woman, mid-40s, sharp suit, briefcase. "Miss Adaisi, my name is Barrister Neka Okoli. I specialize in domestic violence cases. I'm here to inform you of your rights and options." Adaisi sat up slowly, wincing. "What options?" "A restraining order has already been issued by the court, but you also have the right to file a civil suit for damages, medical expenses, trauma, loss of income. Additionally, because you were living together and share a joint account, you are entitled to a portion of the marital assets despite not being legally married." Adaisi shook her head. "I don't want his money." Barrister Neka tilted her head. "This isn't about money, Miss Adaisi. This is about accountability. He hurt you. The law says he must pay, not just with prison time, but with restitution. And more importantly," she leaned forward, "if you don't take action, you send a message to him and to every man watching that there are no consequences beyond a slap on the wrist." Adaisi looked down at her hands. Bandaged, bruised. "What do I have to do?" "Sign here, I'll handle the rest." Adaisi signed, not for revenge, not for money, but because accountability wasn't just about him. It was about her. It was about saying, "I matter, my life matters, and what you did was not okay." Chidi sat in his cell. Day 6. The walls were grey. The air smelled like disinfectant and sweat. He hadn't slept properly since the arrest. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. The moment before the first slap, the confusion in her eyes. The moment she hit the ground, the blood. He replayed it over and over, like his brain was trying to find a version where it didn't happen. But it did happen. And no amount of replaying would change it. A counselor came to see him on day 7, court-mandated psychological evaluation. The counselor was a man in his 50s, greying beard, calm demeanor. "Mr. Okafor, I'm Dr. Adebayo. I'll be conducting your evaluation." Chidi didn't look up. Dr. Adebayo sat across from him. "Tell me about your father." Chidi's jaw tightened. "What about him?" "Did he ever hit your mother?" Silence. "Mr. Okafor, I've read the police report. I've seen the videos. I know what you did. What I'm trying to understand is why. And I suspect the answer starts with your father." Chidi's hands clenched. "He's dead. That doesn't mean he's gone." Chidi looked up. Dr. Adebayo met his eyes. "You carry him. In your hands, in your voice, in the way you respond to fear. Your father taught you something when you were a child, and you've been executing that lesson ever since. The question is, are you ready to stop?" Chidi's voice cracked. "I didn't want to be him." "But you became him." I know. Do you know why? Chidi shook his head. Dr. Adebayo leaned forward. You became him because you never processed what you saw. You never named the wound. You just carried it. And wounds that aren't named don't heal. They fester, and eventually they burst. Chidi put his head in his hands. I loved her. I believe you, but love doesn't erase programming, and you were programmed to believe that violence restores order. You saw your father hit your mother. You saw the house go quiet. You saw your mother cook dinner, and your 8-year-old brain recorded, "This is what men do when they feel powerless." Chidi's shoulders shook. I can't take it back. No, you can't. But you can do something your father never did. What? You can choose to break. Dr. Adebayo gave him an assignment. Write a letter. Not to her, you're not allowed to contact her. Write a letter to the boy you were, the 8-year-old standing in that doorway. Chidi stared at the blank paper for 2 days. On the 3rd day, he started writing. Dear Chidi, you were 8 years old. You didn't ask to see what you saw. You didn't ask to learn that love looks like fists and silence. You didn't ask to carry the weight of a grown man's violence on your small shoulders. You were a child, and you deserved better. You deserved a father who knew how to be powerless without being violent. You deserved a mother who knew how to leave instead of hum. You deserved to grow up knowing that anger doesn't have to end in blood. But you didn't get that, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I let you grow up thinking that the only way to feel safe was to make someone else feel small. I'm sorry I became him. I'm putting the weight down now. Not because I deserve forgiveness, but because you, that boy in the doorway, deserved better than what I became. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Chidi folded the letter. He didn't send it anywhere. There was nowhere to send it. But he read it every night in his cell. And every night he let himself cry. Not the sobs of a man trying to avoid consequences, but the tears of a boy who finally, after 24 years, got to grieve. 6 months later, Adaez stood in front of a small group of women in a community center in Surulere, survivors of domestic violence. Some had left. Some were still deciding. All of them carried the same look in their eyes, the look of women who had learned to measure their words, their movements, their very existence around another person's anger. Adaez knew that look. She used to see it in the mirror every morning. My name is Adaez, she said, and I stayed with a man who hurt me because I thought leaving would mean I failed. The room was silent. I grew up watching my father destroy himself with alcohol, and I spent my entire childhood trying to save him. I hid bottles, I begged, I prayed. And when he died, I blamed myself. I thought if I had just been better, smarter, stronger, he'd still be alive. A few women nodded. They understood. So when I met a man who was broken, I didn't run. I leaned in. Because I thought, this time I'll get it right. This time I'll be enough. This time I'll save him. Adaez paused. But you can't save someone by absorbing their violence. That's not love. That's sacrifice. And sacrifice without boundaries is just slow suicide. A young woman in the back raised her hand. How did you leave? Adaez touched the faint scar on her cheekbone. I didn't leave because I was strong. I left because I finally got honest. I admitted that I wasn't trying to save him. I was trying to save myself from the guilt of not saving my father. And I almost died trying to fix a wound that wasn't mine to fix. Another woman spoke. But what if he changes? What if he gets help? Adaez looked at her. Then I'm happy for him. But his healing is not my responsibility. My healing is, and I can't heal in the presence of the person who broke me. After the session, Ngozi met her outside. You were good in there. I was honest. Same thing. They walked to a nearby buka, ordered rice and stew. Ngozi studied Adaez's face. You look different. How? Lighter, like you put something down. Adaez smiled. I did. What? The belief that I'm only valuable if I can fix someone broken. Ngozi reached across the table, squeezed her hand. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of me too. Adaez's forensic losses were real. She lost the relationship. She lost the future she had imagined. Marriage, children, the life she thought they were building. She lost the version of herself who believed love could cure trauma. But her forensic gains were greater. She found boundaries, she found her voice, she found the courage to say, I am not responsible for healing the person who hurt me. And she found peace. Not the loud, celebratory kind, the quiet kind. The kind that comes when you stop running from the truth and finally let yourself rest in it. Chidi was released after 18 months. He walked out of the prison gates on a Thursday morning. No one picked him up. His mother had disowned him after the videos went viral. His friends had stopped calling after the first month. His former colleagues avoided him in professional circles. He had no job, no reputation, no wife. He stood on the side of the road with a plastic bag containing his belongings and felt the full weight of his choices. He moved into a one-room apartment in Ajagunle. Cheap, cramped, loud, he got a job washing cars at a mechanic shop. Minimum wage, humbling. But he showed up every day. He attended court-mandated therapy every week. He read books on trauma, on generational wounds, on how violence becomes inheritance. He didn't make excuses. He didn't blame his father. He owned it. One evening, Dr. Adebayo asked him a question. If you could speak to her, which you can't, legally, what would you say? Chidi thought for a long time. I'd say, I'm sorry, not the I'm sorry, please come back kind. The I'm sorry and I understand why you'll never forgive me kind. I'd say, you deserved better. You deserved a man who knew how to hold his pain without turning it into your blood. And I'm sorry I wasn't that man. Dr. Adebayo nodded. Good, now say it to yourself. Chidi looked confused. What? You talk about her like she was the only victim, but there's another victim in this story. The 8-year-old boy who watched his father and learned the wrong lessons. That boy deserved better too. And part of your healing is forgiving him, forgiving yourself for not knowing what you didn't know. Chidi's eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I can. Then start small. Start by stopping the blame. Start by saying, I was hurt, and I hurt someone else. And now I'm learning a different way. Chidi nodded. Chidi's forensic losses were total. His career, blacklisted in his industry. No firm would hire him with a domestic violence conviction. His reputation, the videos were still online. His name was still associated with violence. His family, his mother refused his calls. His siblings stopped responding to messages. His identity, the man he thought he was, successful, confident, in control, was gone. But he had gained something his father never had. Accountability. The knowledge that he was not destined to repeat the cycle. The choice to break instead of continuing to break others. 2 years after the parking lot incident, Adaze sat in a cafe in Lekki. She was reading a book on trauma recovery. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. She almost deleted it. But something made her open it. It was from Chidi's therapist, Dr. Adebayo. Miss Adaze, I hope this message finds you well. I am reaching out on behalf of my client, Mr. Chidi Okafor. He has completed his court-mandated therapy and has requested permission to write you a letter. Not to contact you directly, but as part of his healing process. You are under no obligation to read it. But if you choose to, I will forward it through a third party. Please let me know. Adaze stared at the message for a long time. She thought about the woman she used to be. The woman who would have said yes immediately because she couldn't resist the pull to fix him. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She typed a response. Dr. Adebayo, thank you for reaching out. I appreciate the work you are doing with him. However, I choose not to receive the letter. My healing does not require his words. I wish him well, but my chapter with him is closed. She hit send, and she felt nothing but peace. The narrator would tell you this. So here's the question no one wants to answer. If a man was programmed to see violence as love, is he a villain or a victim? The truth is harder than either label. He was a victim of a childhood that taught him violence equals order. But he became a villain the moment he had access to therapy, to awareness, to a woman who begged him to get help, and he chose pride over healing. And if a woman chose him knowing the red flags, did she enable the wound? She didn't cause the abuse, but she enabled it by treating his red flags like a project instead of a warning. Her savior complex wasn't love. It was a wound looking for another wound to fix. The truth is this. They were both carrying trauma they didn't create, but they both made choices that turned trauma into tragedy. He is accountable for raising his hand. She is accountable for staying after he punched the wall, shattered the glass, grabbed her wrist. And the only way either of them heals is by facing the child they were and refusing to let that child pilot the adult they are. Adaze sat in her apartment, the one she paid for with her own salary, and watched the sun set over Lagos. She had a new job at a larger non-profit. She had rebuilt her relationship with Ngozi, with Emeka, with herself. She had learned to say no without guilt. She had learned that love without boundaries is not love. It's complicity. And she had learned that she was not responsible for saving anyone but herself. She was at peace. Chidi sat in his one-room apartment in Ajagunle, staring at the letter he'd written but would never send. He had no wife, no career, no reputation, but he had something he didn't have 2 years ago. The knowledge that the cycle could be broken, that he was not his father, not because he said it, but because he chose it. Every day, in therapy, in his thoughts, in his refusal to blame anyone but himself. He would never see her again. He would never hear her voice. But in that small, cramped room, he was doing the work his father never did. He was choosing to break. And breaking, he was learning, is the first step toward healing. Did he deserve forgiveness? Did she enable it by staying? Or are we all just walking around with wounds we didn't ask for, trying not to bleed on people who didn't cut us? The answer is not simple, because healing never is. But here's what we know. Generational wounds don't break themselves. They break when someone, wounded, terrified, humbled, finally chooses to say, "This ends with me. I will not pass this forward. I will face the child I was, and I will teach that child a different way." Chidi made that choice in a prison cell. Adais made that choice in a hospital bed. And both of them, in their separate futures, became the proof that trauma doesn't have to be inheritance. It can be interrupted. It can be named. It can be broken. But only if you're willing to do the hardest thing. Stop running from the wound. And finally, courageously, devastatingly, heal. So let me ask you, was Chidi a monster or was he a victim of a cycle he didn't create? Was Adaeze complicit for staying, or was she just a wounded woman trying to rewrite her childhood? And here's the harder question. If you've ever stayed in something that hurt you, or if you've ever hurt someone because you were hurting, does that make you the villain, or does it make you human? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation is just beginning.